Hi, I'm Michael Wayne with the Quantum Revolution website, and today I have a special guest and an interview with Diane Williams. Diane, and I'm just going to read and encapsulate her biography. Diane is the founder and president of the Source of Synergy Foundation, and also directs the Evolutionary Leaders in Service to Conscious Evolution Circle. The Source of Synergy Foundation is an organization committed to consciously synergizing individuals, organizations, and efforts by tapping into the infinite source of the collective potential to serve as a positive force for global transformation. Diane has also served on a number of NGOs with the United Nations. She's the first chairperson of the NGO Committee on Spirituality, Values, and Global Concerns. She's served as co-chair and co-founder of this committee at the United Nations in Geneva, where it originated, and currently serves as a council member of the Spiritual Caucus at the United Nations. And you're also a co-creator of the Sacred Place at the United Nations World Summit on Sustainable Development. And you've won a number of awards, including the Spirit of the United Nations Award in 2011 and the Golden Rules Award in 2010. And in 1999, received the PMAC Peace Award. Okay, so great. Well, it's great to have you here, Diane. And I guess
it's nice to be here.
Yeah, and I'm in Saratoga Springs, New York. Where are you currently?
I'm in Italy. I'm actually in northern Italy on Lake Maggiore.
Oh, great.
In a small town called Bay.
Oh, great. Must be very beautiful there.
It's very beautiful.
Yeah, so first, I've read your biography, and just perhaps you could tell us a little more about yourself and your life's journey to where you are now.
Sure. I'll start from the beginning. I think I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and I feel like I came into the world knowing that I wanted to help others and contribute to change on the planet. Since I was very young, even I remember when I was about 4 or 5, I would try to organize the neighborhood kids to promote awareness about environmental education. We did this whole Smokey the Bear Forest Fire campaign where I got them all to sing a little song. And then I did just different ways to help people, like walkathons and other activities. But I had a very profound spiritual experience when I was about 9 or 10. I was praying. I was Catholic at the time with my rosary beads. And I had an experience of a telepathic message. A light came into my room, and I was asked a question. And the question was, would I be willing to help people on the planet create a shift? And in so many words, I'm just sort of paraphrasing. And if I'd be willing to dedicate my life to this. And I said yes. And I felt that I took that commitment very seriously. And I always knew that it was something very real because I was always guided from one spiritual assignment to the next. So I felt like my life was directed, and I really didn't have to worry if I was going to keep my word and follow that promise. So everything that I've done up until this point has really been about social or spiritual or political change. Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, I work for the United Nations. I chaired a committee on spirituality, values, and global concerns, and I'm now working with the Source of Synergy Foundation. So it's always been about social or spiritual or political change. So that's my life up to this point.
Yeah, well, that's great. And that's what you would consider to be your life's work then, what everything that you're doing and the way you've been able to culminate and integrate, I imagine, all these different aspects together. Would you say that to be the case?
Yes, absolutely. Even when I was young, I wanted to go into the Peace Corps. So at this point in time, it's really an integration of what I feel is my life's work, which is really to create synergy. Uh-huh. I think it's a real acknowledgement that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Uh-huh. That's great. So you work still as the founder, president of the Source of Synergy Foundation then, and mm-hmm. What would you say is the mission of the Source of Synergy Foundation at this point in time?
The mission of the Source of Synergy Foundation is basically to create synergy together with people so we can help make a shift in consciousness together. Uh-huh. That's the basic mission.
Yeah. And what would you say, And I totally agree with that, and I feel that's my life's work also. So what would you say, we'll deconstruct that a little bit, some of the biggest challenges facing humanity right now?
I think one of the biggest challenges is a crisis in ego, because this really prevents us from cooperating and seeing the other and the earth as extensions of ourselves, especially if you look to what's happening now with Hurricane Sandy. I mean, we know that a lot of that is human-made, and I think people are only beginning to wake up to the fact that maybe they played a role in creating this disaster. So I think until we wake up and see ourselves as interconnected, I think we're going to continue to see these issues over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Barbara Marx Hubbard, I've heard her say many times that crises are evolutionary drivers. So we can only hope that, since you brought up Hurricane Sandy, that we don't see too many of these crises to push us to evolve, but because the scenes in the media and for the people in the midst of it is horrific. It's very hard. So
yeah, it's very hard. I think in a lot of ways it's sort of bringing us back to some basics, because we have been a little bit out of touch even with community. Because I was in the midst of September 11th, because I went down to the armory where they were helping people, and we just showed our UN badges and they let us in. And for 2 months I was working with the families of the victims and victims. And I have to say it was very bittersweet. It was a terrible crisis, but also I've never seen people cooperate, come together, love the other person. I remember one time I looked at a woman that had just lost her husband and she was pregnant. And it was like when I was looking at her and trying to support her, it was like looking at your beloved. You really didn't feel any separation between yourself and the person. And it really redefined for me what love and humanity and community was all about. So I agree with Barbara. I mean, I know she says this all the time, crisis is an evolutionary driver. And I think these type of crises are really going to bring us back to the basics in life, which is, being a good neighbor. I know my brother and his wife have no electricity still. They live on Long Island. And their neighbors have a generator. And they're all going over there and eating together and staying there, and they're just getting a sense of being taken care of. And a lot of times we don't feel that in isolation. Remember when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Africa, everybody took care of each other. They had no idea that we had the concept of homelessness in the U.S. They just said, but how? You have so much money. How could there be people that don't have homes? Because they take their neighbors in. Everybody's their brother and sister, and they make sure that they take care of everybody. So it was so out of the realm of their thinking that we could have so much, yet there could be people on the street.
Yeah. And that leads to my next question, which you somewhat answered, but I'll ask it anyway. You might add a few more things to it. And that's, how can people learn, because ultimately to deal with these challenges and have a ship, people have to learn to live more peacefully and lovingly with one another. So would you say, is this the way for people to learn to live more peacefully and lovingly?
Well, I'd hate to think that a disaster has to make people learn to live, but I think it's one way. I think the earth has, the environment has an intelligence, and I think the environment is showing us that there's consequences to our actions. So I think that's not always, of course, when you see the disaster, it doesn't comfort people at all, but I think we have to be mindful of that. But I also think that people have to learn to live more peacefully and lovingly with another. It has to start early, like in the homes and in the schools. I remember I watched a video with the Brahma Kumaris, their spiritual organization, and they had a program called Living Values. And it showed how they went to a young, maybe it was kindergarten or first grade, I don't remember, a class where they taught children values each week. So how to share their toys, how to, love their friend. And it was amazing to see the transformation in these little children. And then how the other children in the other class that didn't have this early education, they were behaving differently. So I think that's really important, a really important component. But also the other component, I think, is to meditate or to do mantras or some way to get on a higher vibration. Because if you have inner peace, that's really the most solid foundation for world peace. There's a Lama that I know, and he always says that. Because I think that's so true. Because when you are peaceful inside, you cannot, harm the other person if you take this peace on. Of course, we all, have our moments. But overall, it's very hard to be violent if you have that sense of inner peace. And I think the third thing I could say to this is the importance of living one's life mission, because I think if you're fulfilling your purpose on earth, there's a satisfaction with that pacifies you. I have some friends that still have not found what their life's mission is, and they have inside they feel like unfulfilled. So I think if you have a sense of what you're supposed to do on this planet while you're here, I think it really contributes a lot to living a more peaceful and loving existence.
That's definitely well put. When you resonate with yourself, with the universe, however you want to put it, you're more content and happy, and that exudes to others too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll ask this question because you mentioned with your work, with your life's work and the Source of Synergy Foundation with the evolutionary leaders, this and your work and other people's work also moving in this direction of as you call it, it's called a shift in consciousness. So what would you say is this relationship between a global leap in consciousness and societal transformation?
Well, I think that's a good question. I haven't thought about that so much, but I think they go hand in hand. I think they have to happen at a simultaneous level. So, for example, I think there's so many more stores popping up like Whole Foods because people wish to live in a more healthy way, and not only for themselves, but you hear more people talking about even the farmers. They're thinking about how the farmers are growing food with pesticide. So their purchases are not only reflecting, their own, family, values, but they're also thinking about societal concerns and other people. So I think this sense of oneness where, we feel like we're more responsible not just for ourselves, but beyond ourselves is contributing to that shift in consciousness. So I really think it has to be the global and the local simultaneously, and I think that's what will really help the shift.
Right. And as you said, also the personal transformation is part of that thread of societal transformation. Because how can we bring peace to the world without bringing peace to ourselves? It goes hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that has to happen.
Yeah. So many people, when they look at the challenges facing us and the challenge in the East Coast last week with Hurricane Sandy. They feel pessimism and despair, but at the same time, we want to be hopeful. So what would you say, how can we be hopeful at a time like this? Where do you maintain your hope and optimism?
Well, I think I have to go back to my experience with 9/11, because I have to say the interfaith understanding, we had Sikh cab drivers, Sikhs that wear the turban, and we would help out at the Family Assistant Unit and leave sometimes 2 a.m. And they were very conscious that, people were being discriminated against because there was a lack of understanding about, who was responsible for the crisis. And they were so loving and so kind, and they said, we're here to help. So that gave me a lot of hope, because people even looked at the other in a different way because they had to, because of the crisis. And I saw people much more humble. I mean, I think New Yorkers felt invincible before September 11th, and I think we started feeling that again before Hurricane Sandy. And people, like even my friend Zahida told me the other day, she was walking down her neighborhood and almost everybody was smiling at her. Like she was, a close friend. And so I think there's hope in that, like people are feeling closer, like neighbors. They're also, I think these crises they have to be innovative. in their own lives, and I think politicians are being called to be more innovative because climate change was not part of this political conversation. But now it has to. I mean, they have to look to renewable energy like solar and wind. And I think that's where the hope is, because we don't change sometimes until we're almost forced to change because we have to change. So I think these are, like Barbara said, evolutionary drivers that are really calling us to move beyond our comfort zone. And that's what evolution is really about. It's taking one step beyond.
Right.
And that's what we're being called right now to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so even though Barbara says crises are evolutionary drivers, they're not the only evolutionary drivers. There's any form, as you're talking about what happened after Hurricane Sandy and 9/11, any form where people can unite in consciousness. I remember after 9/11 seeing all over the world people holding signs saying we are all New Yorkers or we are all Americans. And I don't know if you're aware of the Global Consciousness Project, which measures spurts in consciousness and intention with these random number generators they've put in various places around the world. There's been some documentaries about it.
Like
but
the Global Coherence Project. Like
the Global Coherence Project, yeah. And they talk about after 9/11 all this the measurable changes in consciousness and unity consciousness that erupted from it. So that's a thread of personal transformation, global transformation of consciousness. That the question that I asked you before. So it's when we can become more like that without crises to push us and that's where the hope is, I would say.
Yeah, and that's the real challenge. Like, how do we become that day to day? You know, how do we do that without having the crises? Is there a way that we could think of creating certain programs, especially like I was saying earlier in the schools, that would just set that foundation so that we don't have to have a crisis to be almost our real selves? Because that's what I noticed during 9/11. It was like the power of the human spirit was so strong and it was so beautiful. It was like everybody was being their best selves, at least where we were in this family assistant unit, the firemen, the policemen, the Red Cross workers, the families. Everybody was just raw and they were just real. And I think if we could all interact in the world in that way all the time, the shift in consciousness would happen, in 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Raw. People were their authentic selves. Let go.